Disclaimer. This episode contains graphic descriptions of violence that may be disturbing to some listeners. Please be advised.
Hello.
Hi.
I'm Taylor.
I'm Mandy.
I'm Amanda.
And this is Pop, Crime, and Wine.
Welcome.
Welcome.
So this week is a very special one. We have some experts on the case that we're about to talk about, which is incredibly exciting.
I think we're all nervous and excited all at the same time. So.
I'm a little nervous, I'm not going to lie.
But that's why we have wine.
That's why we have wine.
So this week's episode is sponsored again by Arrington Vineyards, which is a local Nashville winery. And we have Red Fox Red, which is a red blend. And it's one of my, as everyone knows.
You had that at your wedding, right?
Yeah, I love Arrington wine.
Yeah.
So this is more of the classic red. It's nothing super fancy. It's just a nice.
We're not fancy people.
Yeah, no, we're not.
Speak for yourselves.
I'm not a
I'm
fancy person. As you can tell from my beanie and my Garth Brooks t-shirt.
Unknown caller.
Hello. Can you hear us all right?
I can hear okay.
Oh,
Okay,
great.
Perfect. All right, so let's get started and kind of introduce our listeners to the awesome guests that we have on the podcast today.
Yes.
Jackie Nichols and Gloria. Do you say that Bobertz?
It's Bobertz.
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 Oh, it was 50-50. I could have gotten it really right the first time or incredibly wrong, and I didn't do it.
Taylor has a weird last name, so she always gets.
It's all good.
So why don't you introduce yourselves to the listeners and kind of let them know how you're associated with the ID channel and this case that we're about to talk about.
Okay, would you like to start with?
How about you, Jackie?
Yes.
Okay, well, I'm Detective Jackie Nichols from the Assaulton County Sheriff's Office in Assaulton County, Washington. And my part in the show is that the Investigation Discovery Channel and this production company had an idea of following me around while I was investigating a cold case, not knowing what the outcome would be when they began the project. And so they basically have followed me around for almost 2 years while I worked on these cases, and it's been a really fascinating and great experience.
Wow. Have you gotten to know the casting crew pretty well, and you guys are all friends now?
Oh, everyone I worked with from the show was great. They were super friendly, really made me feel at ease. At first, it was a little awkward for me to have a film crew following me around, but they were so nice, and they were always really respectful of the work that I was doing, and always the investigation of the cases came before the making of the show.
Wow.
So it was a great experience.
That's awesome.
Yeah. What about you?
Real quick.
Oh, yeah.
What's your favorite type of wine?
Yes, we were wondering.
Oh my goodness, are you talking to me?
Yep.
Yes.
We're going to ask
Or
you
both
both.
of you, yeah.
So, Gloria, get ready.
Okay, my favorite type of wine is beer.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Love it.
But if I had to choose a wine, I really like the 14 Hands Hot to Trot red blend.
Oh, I don't know if I've ever tried
All
that.
right, that's our next wine.
Yeah, we should try that.
Hot to trot, Jackie. I know.
Hot
I should have had
Gloria's
something
not convinced.
more fitting in mind, but I do like that one.
That's
That's so
fantastic.
funny. Okay, Gloria, what's yours?
Well, first, Gloria, why don't you tell us about yourself? And
Sorry, I was more
well,
concerned with the one. Now I want to know.
you're like, what type of wine do you like? Or you can go ahead and start out with what type of wine you like.
Okay, let's just go back to my roots when I was underage. No, I'm kidding. How about Strawberry Hill? You know?
Oh, yeah.
Boone's Farm, Strawberry Hill. There
Is
you
this
go,
like Boone's
girls.
Farm?
Yes. That's what she said.
I'm
yeah.
a beer person.
Okay.
Like Jackie, beer is my favorite.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
yeah, if I had to go with a wine, I would say a Riesling. And
Okay.
yeah, barefoot.
Yeah.
Yeah, nice.
I like a good barefoot.
Yeah.
I used to
haven't had it
drink
in a while.
barefoot Moscato all the time.
It's like straight
Oh,
sugar.
that is second. That's second. A little sweet wine, yes.
It's dessert in a glass.
All right. Well, Gloria, why don't you tell us about yourself and how you're tied to the case?
I am Christina Nelson's relative, and I have been doing research for several years on the cases, and I met up with Jackie probably about 10 years ago, and started handing over information to her, and it just started, information started trickling in, people started contacting me, and I've gotten tips and have been able to put together my own kind of like profile of the person of interest, and then all the information I've given to Jackie, and that's what I've done.
Yeah. So Christina
Batman.
Nelson we'll get into it further for our listeners who don't know about the case yet. She is one of the victims of the Lewis Clark Valley murders. And yeah, I guess we should get into it and maybe tell people a little bit about it. Do you guys want to kind of give an overview, or should we just jump in?
Oh, you can go ahead.
Okay.
They're like, we talk about it all the time.
We'll go in like chronological order.
Yeah,
this
and
time.
if we run into anything that doesn't sound right, please
Just
feel
tell
free
us. Yes.
to let us
Okay.
know.
Sure.
Okay. So the title of the series that you're a part of, the docuseries, is called Cold Valley. And it is
Right.
on ID Discovery, and it premieres
You just are
November.
redundant. It's ID channel.
I
Because
say
investigation
ID
discovery. If you
You're
say
right.
ID discovery, you're saying investigation discovery.
Well, you know what? I like
ATM machine.
I like being redundant. Okay, but either way, people know what I'm talking about.
It's on that
The ID channel.
Yes.
The Investigation Discovery channel. And it's a 2-part series. And it is about the Lewis Clark Valley murders.
And it premieres November 29th,
Which is,
next Thursday.
yes, a week
Next
from Turkey Day.
Yep.
Yes. And then the follow-up comes out December 6th.
Is that right? 6th?
Yes, that's correct.
Perfect. Now, the Lewis Clark Valley murders, it's actually murders and disappearances. There are a few victims who haven't been found yet. And
That's right.
they're cold cases from about 40 years ago, back from 1979, between 79 and 82.
Yes.
Yes.
Right.
And there are 5 different people, and all of this happened on the border of Washington State and Idaho, which they call
In the
that,
vicinity, right.
yeah, they call that the Lewis Clark Valley, right?
That's right.
Can you explain to us why it's called that?
Well, the 2 towns that are across the river from each other are Lewiston, Idaho, and Clarkston, Washington. And, they're named after Lewis and Clark, the Lewis and Clark expedition came through the area. And so that's why the towns were named Lewiston, Clarkston. And the area is somewhat of a valley, and so it's known as the Lewis Clark Valley.
Awesome.
And there are rivers, 2 rivers that connect the 2, right?
Right,
Clearwater,
the Clearwater
and Snake.
River and the Snake River, and the confluence of the 2 rivers is sort of in between Lewiston and Clarkston, right in that area.
Okay.
Great.
Just a visual for everybody out there.
Yeah. So I figure we could start out with the first victim,
Christina White.
Christina White. Yes, this happened back in April 28th of 1979.
Right.
12-year-old Christina White went to a parade with her mother and her sister in their hometown of Asotin, Washington. Afterwards, her mother dropped her off at her friend Rose's house, where she had brought her bicycle so she could ride home after they were done hanging out. And at some point, she called her mother in the day and told her that she was having issues with overheating, which I think in the docuseries, they said that it was something that she, had issues
Struggled
with
with,
before. Yeah. And so her mother told her to put like a cold cloth on her head and to, just come home. And 12-year-old Christina never made it back.
Right.
And she still has never been found.
To this day.
Right.
And
now,
go ahead. Oh, no, you can go.
They discovered school papers. Is that right? Off the outskirts of your town? Right.
There was a packet of Christina White's school papers found several months after she went missing. And the condition of the school papers was really in good, clean condition. So it wasn't like they'd been out there for months. Oh. It was like, they had just been either placed there or been thrown out there. And there was a connection between the area where those papers were found and the person of interest. But of course, that connection was not made for several years.
Right.
At the time, it just appeared to be some type of anomaly that her papers turned up.
Right.
Right. There was also the owner of that farm had found a depression in the earth. And this was part of the docuseries that I was really interested, enthralled. Like, watching you dig was a really just kind of crazy moment.
It was so, in the moment, I mean, that was really happening at that time.
Right.
That was the first time you were going there and doing this, and we were watching it.
That's the kind of thing that I've done over the years is, if information comes up about a place that hasn't been searched or looked at, I'll go and look. I'll go and dig. I'll go and do whatever it is that I can do. And so that was just something that came up that the film crew was around for when that information came in, and we went out and worked on it.
And you're the only detective for this area, correct?
Right. For the Asotin County, which is a very rural county, we're a small agency, and I'm the only detective in our agency.
Which is crazy.
There are detectives in the city of Lewiston, and then a detective for the city of Clarkston, and we certainly collaborate on cases and help each other out a lot. But for our county, I am the only detective.
Wow.
There was something that you said in the docuseries that I'm not going to repeat because I want everybody to actually go and listen to it. But when you were digging, you said something about how you didn't find her there, but you might find her
3 feet away.
Yeah. And I thought that was really profound.
Yeah.
Right.
Hard.
Right. Well, and that's part of living in such a rural and vast wilderness style landscape. It's not like when someone goes missing in a city or a town or a place that's easily searched. We have very steep terrain. We have very rugged terrain. We have areas that you can't reach by vehicle. So it can be very daunting.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So how long between the first and the second victim?
2 years.
Okay, yeah. So that was 1979, and so skip ahead 2 years, and Kristen David was a college student in the area, and she had talked to her mom on the phone and said that she was going to ride her bike home, which was about a 3-hour-ish. It would have taken her about 3 hours
she
to get.
Was going on a bike ride. She was just going, traveling.
I thought she was going home.
Mm-mm.
Oh,
she actually had 2 residences because she was a student at the University of Idaho. She maintained an apartment in Moscow, Idaho, which is a little town about 40 miles from Lewiston. But then in the summers she worked. She grew up in Lewiston, and she had an apartment in Lewiston. And so sorry, there's a clock chiming in the background. I'm in the lobby of this building.
Oh.
so I can't control the sounds around me.
That's okay.
But anyway, because she kept the apartment in Moscow, she had gone up there. Her bicycle was up there. She got a ride up to her apartment there and planned to ride her bicycle back from Moscow, Idaho to Lewiston, Idaho, which was mostly a flat and then a downhill steep grade, which she anticipated would take her about 3 hours. But she had never actually ridden her bicycle between Moscow and Lewiston before, so it was going to be kind of an adventure.
Okay.
Yeah, she did mention that in the series. Like, she's talking to her mom. She's like, I wish you could go with me. And her mom was like, yeah, it sounds like fun. And she ended up going missing, so she never made it to her destination. But they just don't know where in between point A and point
They're
B.
not, right. They don't know for sure. I mean, there were certainly people that saw her along the road riding her bicycle. But there was enough descriptions of people riding on that roadway of that there may have been more than one girl riding their bike on that. It was a nice day. It was, the time of year when people are out riding bikes. So some of the eyewitness accounts could be just sometimes people don't get the information correct, or there could have been more than one girl out riding a bike that day on that same road.
Right. And I'm sure people want to be helpful and, they want to give you guys tips or something. And, sometimes it gets flooded with misinformation. So.
Correct. Absolutely.
So she ended up not making it, and then her parents filed a missing persons report, and there was some misinformation also about the filing the missing persons, because they were saying that they couldn't do that because of her age or something, and that's not correct. Like, they couldn't file it within 48 hours or something because she was an adult.
Yeah, as soon as they realized that she was missing, they did make a report, and the report was taken. It was just that in that day and age, before cell phones and all the technology that we have now, it took a little bit of time to check with family and friends and see if anyone knew where she was or had seen her. But once they realized she was indeed missing, they made the report, and law enforcement, began actively searching for her.
Right. So she actually ended up being, her remains were found about a week and a half or so later on the 4th of July.
And she went missing on the 26th
of June.
Okay.
Right.
And she was dismembered and found wrapped in newspaper and in garbage bags found by a local fisherman along a riverbank. So
was that Snake River?
Yes, okay. It's past the confluence of the Clearwater and the Snake Rivers.
Okay.
And was all of her body found?
A majority of her body was found. There was one bag that was seen floating in the river that the people that went out and were searching, once there have been a couple of these bags discovered, then law enforcement went out sort of in mass, and there were people in boats and people on the riverbank looking, and there was one bag that they could see in the water, but they never could get to it before it went downstream or went underwater. And so it's speculated that the parts that were not recovered were probably in that bag.
Right.
Oh, okay.
And I guess the only evidence that they had at that time were the newspapers that her body was found wrapped in, and the trash bags and everything else connected.
The garbage bags and the newspapers themselves.
Do you think had DNA testing been more advanced, they could have gotten a little further in the case back then?
I think the potential was certainly there because, at the time the body was found, there may have been DNA evidence on the body itself, on the various parts of the body, could have retained DNA evidence, maybe fibers, maybe hairs, things that at that time, trace evidence, which at that time they wouldn't have had any connection to anything, but with today's technology, had those things been recovered, might have revealed the DNA of the suspect.
Yeah. I had a question. Do you think the person responsible is trained in like medicine or surgery? Because it did say that the parts that were recovered were like meticulously like wrapped and just, like taken apart.
Right. There's been a lot of speculation about that, but what does this mean? What does the way this was done? What does it mean about the person that did it? And I've talked to different experts about those topics, and I've gotten kind of varying information, but the consensus is the person that did it probably had in the past maybe was a hunter or someone that had dismembered an animal. Mm-hmm. But in talking to medical examiners now, they felt that because of the way the dismemberment was done, they didn't have a lot of knowledge of human anatomy. And once they began, trying to dismember the body, they encountered some difficulties because of the differences between the human body and an animal's body.
Oh, interesting.
I have a question, because I don't understand the science behind it, but how, so if someone dismembers a body, there's obviously going to be a lot of blood. And I know that if you clean up the blood and everything, like, there's still trace evidence. How long does that last for? Like, if you found the place that it happened at now, would you be able to know? Or
that is all extremely dependent on the totality of the circumstances, which basically means it depends on whether that scene was a scene that was protected, or was it outdoors? Did someone try to clean it up? Is it something that's exposed to, weather, sunlight, rain, all of those types of things? So if it's an outdoor scene, it'd be very unlikely that there would be anything that we would be able to locate. Right. If it was an indoor scene, there's a possibility, but depending on what people had done to try and rectify that situation, they may have been able to obliterate any evidence. If it's a vehicle, there is some potential that trace evidence could remain. Certainly if there's still carpet or that type of thing in a vehicle, there's lots of cracks and crevices that trace evidence can end up in. But DNA deteriorates over time too, depending on what it's exposed to, heat, moisture, all of those things. Like I just recently found out that shoes don't, the inside of your shoe, which you think would have a lot of your DNA in it, they don't retain DNA because your foot sweat degrades the DNA.
Oh,
so it's very hard to get a person's DNA from their shoes.
Wow.
That is such a fun fact.
Well,
that's insane.
Right?
Yeah.
Wow.
Disappointing for me because I had really wanted to get a person's DNA from a pair of shoes on a different case. But, but interesting.
That's definitely interesting. And contrary to what, I mean, because, you watch all these crime shows and stuff and you're like, it seems so easy, to get a hair.
That is frustrating for detectives. The CSI effect is a real thing.
Yeah.
And juries really do expect to see the technology used and see those kind of absolute, for sure, DNA comparisons and matches.
Okay.
I'm gonna have Taylor go over the next case too, just because I'm afraid that I'm gonna say something like I'm gonna not do it correctly. She's better at storytelling.
That's
than
actually
I am.
not true at all. I don't think you give yourself enough credit, honestly.
Well,
but the next victims are Christina Nelson, which we talked about a little bit earlier, and Brandy Miller,
because that is Gloria's cousin.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And this happened September 12th, 1982 in Lewiston, Idaho. Both girls had left Christina's apartment to go to the store, correct? They were going shopping, or they were going to do laundry?
They went to the store. They left a note on the door for Christina's boyfriend. And as far as I know from people I have talked to, they were never seen in the grocery store. So that's, never been confirmed that they made it there. So
Okay.
go ahead, Jackie, if you want to jump in.
No, you're
Detail facts.
you're doing great. You're doing
She's
good.
like holding her breath, like, oh.
Jackie walked, and I have walked the path that the girls probably took. And in theory, what we believe happened is they met up with a person of interest down below the theater, and he probably, because they knew him from the theater, he probably offered to give them a ride, and that's how they encountered him, which would have been down in the vicinity of the Red Baron Pizza,
Okay.
Okay.
because he claims to have been there that evening.
Gloria, could you tell us a little bit about your relationship with Christina?
We were very close in age. We met when we were, she grew up in Idaho, Boise, Idaho, and I grew up in California. So her grandmother and my grandmother were sisters, and we went on a road trip on a vacation one summer. And that's when we were finally able to meet. Before that, we had communicated the old-fashioned way. We were pen pals. And then after our road trip, we continued to be pen pals and talk on the telephone. And then when we were both out of high school and, going into college, and we were over 18, we kind of lost touch with one another. And when she disappeared, my grandmother and her grandmother would talk, and it became, we didn't hear too much about it. I did see some of the newspaper clippings and such as that, and I always wanted to know what happened, what went wrong, who did this to her.
Yeah, of course.
When her body was finally found. And I knew when she went missing, I knew she was gone. I could just feel it. So
It's awful. I can't imagine.
No. I was born in 1990, so I don't really know what happened in 1982. But back then, did they have a lot of, was it all on the TV? Was it a big news story, or was it more in newspapers, or was
Just
it
local?
Yeah, was it local, or did you hear about it in California too?
no, we didn't. To my knowledge, there was nothing printed up in California. It was all Idaho newspapers, the Lewiston Tribune, and if memory serves me right, I believe the Idaho Statesman had done an article on it. And that's basically how the information got out. And my grandmother's sister would send, my grandmother, the newspaper clippings that she had for what had come out in the newspaper, about the girls missing, and then, of course, when their bodies were found. So, no, it was nothing like...
At the time they went missing, sorry to jump in.
That's okay.
No, you're fine.
At the time they went missing, they were missing, and they were young women, 18, 21 years old, and it was at that time in the 70s and 80s, young people did stuff like hitchhike across the country or go out on a lark, and it was a much different sort of era than now, and people could go and do things and you wouldn't know where they were because you didn't have cell phones and you didn't have the internet and you didn't have surveillance cameras. And, people would go on a week-long hike or go for a 2-month trip and just check in when they got back. And hitchhiking was a big
part of town,
norm. And so when they first went missing, law enforcement, certainly took it seriously, but they also thought, well, maybe they went off on some adventure, and because a young man disappeared that same night from the theater, they thought, well, maybe they went somewhere with him, and people had witnessed 2 girls and a young man hitchhiking out of town a couple of different people reported that. And so it wasn't that there were so many people out hitchhiking. I mean, it wasn't that they were so noticeable. I'm sorry about that clock again.
Okay.
It's a beautiful grandfather clock.
It really sounds beautiful.
It wants to be a part of this podcast.
It's
right
kind of noisy.
It's okay.
Okay, it's done. Anyway, there were probably people out hitchhiking, and so, you know, they just thought, they went off on a trip or something.
Right.
And so, because they weren't found for 18 months, once their body was found, then the story was much more published and out there.
You brought up the young man, or I guess he was 35. I think of 35, but I'm 30, and I'm like, I
That's a young
still
man
feel
to me.
young, yeah. His name was Stephen Pearsall, and as you said, he disappeared the same night as Christina and Brandy, and they had a similar connection in the theater, the local theater, right?
Right.
And he had attended a party that night and was dropped up. Can't speak words. He was dropped off at the local theater where he had worked as a janitor, right?
Right.
And he also did laundry there, and he would like to practice his clarinet because it was kind of like an open space and had room and wouldn't bother people.
Well, he lived in an apartment, so I don't think his neighbors would have appreciated him practicing the clarinet at midnight.
I know I would
in
not.
his apartment.
Yeah.
So he disappeared the same exact night, and I'm wondering, is he still... I know at the time he was kind of suspected as being involved. Is he
because of the circumstances, because he went missing the same night as these two young girls and in the same vicinity, and they were both connected to the theater, so I know that it was probably hard to see him as a victim, like, definitively.
He was never actually found, so... Right? He just disappeared.
Right, he's never been found. He's missing.
Is he still considered a possible suspect, or has he been ruled out?
I don't think anyone in law enforcement considers him a true suspect. You know, as long as he has never been found, it has to be considered. But when you use your common sense and the totality of the circumstances, it's just clearly he's not a suspect. He is a victim.
Sorry, go ahead.
Is it possible that since 3 people went missing in one night, is it possible that there's more than one person of interest, or do they...
Well, my feeling on that is that the same person is responsible for Stephen, Christina, and Brandy. And I think what happened was the person of interest was doing whatever he was doing with Christina and Brandy, and Stephen Pearsall just walked into the theater at the wrong time. He was not expected to come back. He'd been working with the person of interest earlier on sets at the theater. And this is a civic theater. They put on plays, not like a movie theater.
Right.
And so he was helping the person of interest earlier in the evening work on the sets. And then he left to go to this retirement party. And he had not said, hey, I'm going to come back and do my laundry, or... It was kind of a spur-of-the-moment decision, and Stephen asked his girlfriend to take him to his house and get his laundry and then drop him back off at the theater so he could do his laundry. So the person of interest was not expecting him back. And I think when he walked in, he was the witness to something horrific and lost his life because of it.
Wrong place, wrong time.
So that brings
Collateral
us...
damage.
Yeah.
So that brings us to that point, is that in the theater that night, there was another man. There was somebody else in the theater with Stephen, and even though the person of interest accidentally put himself there just through questioning, he wasn't aware fully that there was so much evidence that Stephen had been placed there as well.
Right.
So he was kind of banking on just saying that he didn't notice anyone else there that night or something.
And then... Really quickly before we get into the person of interest, because we have a few questions about him, I did want to say that Christina and Brandy's bodies were found 18 months later, correct?
Yes.
And so how far away is that from the theater that they think that they went missing around?
They were found outside of Kendrick, Idaho, which is approximately 35 miles, maybe a little bit more, from Lewiston.
Okay. And I know that their bodies, they had been weathered.
They were
So
outside.
they were out in this like valley
right?
field.
Or-
Yeah, it was. I remember in the
They were
video.
down at the base of an embankment off of Highway 3,
Okay.
which is outside of Kendrick. And it was really quite the fluke, really, that they were found, because it was a teenager that was looking for cans, and his hat blew off, and he was chasing his hat down the hill.
Wow.
And he found a skull, and he thought it was, an animal skull at first, and then he looked at it a little closer, and it was a human skull. So had he not been chasing his hat,
That's insane.
down the hill, their bodies probably, they may not have ever been found. And like Jackie said, the terrain it's a harsh terrain. It's steep embankments, gullies. When I first went up there, I was totally amazed at the vastness of it, and how easily it would be to just throw something off the edge of the road and never see it again.
Wow.
And so,
Yeah, as we were watching this special, part 1, I guess, we figured out by the end of this that there's
Which is so great.
more than because there's a lot of loose ends we need tied.
But
But seeing, they walk you through, and there's video of Jackie walking up this embankment where they were found, and it is really insane to think that somebody just so happened to cross them, because it's just so wide open.
Yeah.
it's amazing.
yeah, when I watched her, Jackie, by the way, every time you go down the hillside, you just make me gasp. She's like a little mountain goat.
Girl, you are. I wish I
Really
was in
and
that
truly,
shape.
I'm holding my breath while she's going down, and I'm thinking, if something happens to her, how am I ever going to get to her? I'm going to roll.
I'll be right there,
It's like
Jackie.
Bear Grylls.
Yes.
The brush that's down at the base of where they were found, you wouldn't see things. It's just not, I can't explain it any better than it's steep and rugged and just a lot of brush, and it really was a miracle that they were found.
I know that you guys are short on time, so we don't want to keep you for too long, because we could talk about this for literally
Forever.
ever.
Yeah.
Yeah, we could too.
But we do have a couple more questions about
Sure.
The person of
the
interest.
person of interest. So while we were watching the show, we all three of us kind of gasped at the after they were talking about Christina and Brandy and Steven, and how the person of interest also had some ties to Christina White. And
Right.
they did a really good job in the show. And I'm going to just point out real quick that everyone should watch the show, because we all think that it's great, and how they don't overdo the reenactments.
It's not cheesy at all.
No, it's a very easy to watch.
They're telling the story.
and it's
very,
great, and they definitely draw you in. And having the personal like relationships between the victims that come in and talk, like you, Gloria, it really I feel like it actually shows a lot about the victims instead of just the story of it.
I think the producers, the film crew, everybody did such a great job of telling the victims' stories.
Yeah.
And how everything happened, laying the cases out, and they were so respectful of the families, but they did bring them to life. They were people.
Yeah.
And yeah.
It's hard to do, and I think that they did a really great job about
Absolutely.
it.
They did a fantastic job.
But so we were noticing that they had a lot of connections between them. Do you want to?
Yeah, so Could you tell us a little bit about this person of interest who is connected to Christina White?
And are we going to
well?
find out who he is?
Well, what happened was in 1982, when the girls went missing from the theater, they were talking to various people, and of course Stephen Pearsall had gone missing too. Law enforcement, starts with family and friends and works their way out. And so they had talked to the theater manager about who Stephen Pearsall's friends and family were, and the theater manager had pointed them in the direction of the person of interest and said, well, this person is friends with Stephen Pearsall. And so law enforcement talked with him, and that was when he kind of made that first misstep of saying that he had been in the theater all night, the night that he disappeared, and that he had never heard Stephen come in the theater. And I think he was banking on the fact that nobody else had any clue about Stephen coming in the theater. Otherwise, I highly doubt he would have placed himself there.
Right.
But at that same time, law enforcement realized, wait a minute, this guy lived in the house where Christina White was last seen in 1979.
Wow.
And so that was the first time, I believe, anyone suspected him or thought about him as a potential suspect in the Christina White case. And in law enforcement, those kind of connections don't just happen randomly and by coincidence.
Right.
It's just not very often someone is connected to one person that disappears or is murdered, but to be connected to more than one.
At that point.
That's really not a coincidence anymore in law enforcement's mind.
And this,
and in talking with Jackie, giving her information and stuff, I learned that law enforcement, they really don't believe in the word coincidence. There is nothing as a coincidence. There is not a coincidence.
Yep. Everything means something.
I never say never, but it usually means something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the other coincidence that wasn't a coincidence was the property that the school papers were found on.
Right. The person of interest and his wife at the time that Christina White, well, they were a boyfriend and girlfriend at the time Christina White disappeared, but they rented a pasture for a horse. Then the horse was for the girlfriend's daughter, and that daughter is the girl that was friends with Christina. Mm-hmm. And so Christina and the daughter would go up and see the horse occasionally, and so it wasn't unusual that Christina may have been at that property, but what was unusual was that her school papers would be found there several months later.
Right. Yeah. And in such good condition, like they, months after.
Like they could have been thrown out, or they could have been, even fallen out of a vehicle. Mm-hmm. And potentially that could have been our person of interest vehicle, because they would have a reason to be there because that's where the horse was.
Right.
So, that is a link, but it's a tenuous one. But it's really the only piece of physical evidence that we have in that case.
So I know on the show they talk about how the person of interest had some other situations come up that people have kind of talked about a little bit. But does he, without giving anything away, does he know that you guys are onto him? And also, this is a two-part question.
Okay.
Sorry. Does he know that you're onto him? And then also, does the small talk of the town and the gossip, does that interfere with the investigation on he said, she said, but we need hard evidence? I know it's a lot.
So I would say yes and yes to those questions.
Yes.
The suspect certainly is aware that he's a suspect, and he has seems to a certain degree to enjoy that notoriety, because he's done and said things that have seemed to purposely keep him in the spotlight that way.
Sick.
But at the same time, he retained an attorney and doesn't want to speak with law enforcement. But to random people, he'll make statements which certainly make them question, why he would say things that are suspicious. And then as far as the local town talk and things like that, we are a small community, and these are huge cases for us in our community. And so people do talk a lot about them, they speculate, but that also generates a lot of rumors and misinformation. And so sometimes that can be really difficult to deal with, the kind of everybody knows attitude. Like, why don't you do something about this case? Everybody knows who did it.
Okay.
And, my response is, well, I can't just call everybody into court. You can't just send out a subpoena for everybody.
And just
you
because
have to have the hard evidence.
Yeah. Is that going to be a huge factor in this case, is trying to find that hard evidence? Is that what you guys have been working on?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, that's exactly what solves cold cases today. In this day of technology and CSI, people want to see that DNA evidence, and it's really, what is almost required to get a successful conviction in a case. We have a mountain of circumstantial evidence. We need that physical evidence.
Okay.
Do you have any doubts that he's the one responsible?
I
No.
don't doubt
Gloria, yes.
Gloria, get him.
I don't doubt that he's responsible for Christina White, Christina Nelson, Randy Miller, and Stephen Pearsall. In the Kristen David case, I'm not as positive.
Okay.
There's things about that case that are really markedly different, and in that time and that era, we had multiple serial killers that were very prolific and working across the country and came through our area. It's documented that there were different serial killers that moved through our area. So I think potentially Kristen David could have been the work of a different killer.
Okay.
Yeah, in doing research, it is mind-boggling how many there were, in California, Washington, and Oregon. And you have to have, you have to look at them, and you have to, figure, were they here at this time? Were they not here at this time? Kind of do your research and case studies on them.
Yeah.
It's
Wow.
terrifying to think about.
Yeah, it's crazy. I'm from Florida, so I feel like I was used to this, and now I'm like, I don't know anything about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you start looking into serial killers and the history of serial killers, it's horrifying.
Yes.
And there's, even though our person of interest, we believe, is killed multiple times, there's serial killers out there that were way more prolific than he was. And
Oh, absolutely.
Wow.
it's frightening. It'll make you lock your doors at night.
Well, you're still going to get them.
Yeah. I know that you guys are, like I said, you're limited on time, and we don't want to take up any more of your time since we've taken so much of it already.
Wrap it up
And
a little bit.
like we've said, we love talking to you guys, and we've really enjoyed getting to know this case through you and through this episode. I can't wait for
Yeah, we're in now. Like,
yeah, we're
I'm ready.
committed.
we're in it to win it.
But
That's
I do
awesome.
have
That's
a,
great. Well, we
Thank you.
appreciate your talking with us and giving us an opportunity to speak.
yeah, of course. We do have one last question, and we wanted to know if we will have some closure.
Will we get an answer?
That is the big question.
Okay.
That's okay.
That's okay. Yeah, that's
That's all we get. Damn it.
Yes, we'll have to.
all right. Well, we will keep watching.
We do.
Great.
We want to tell you how wonderful your French braid is.
Oh,
Yes,
Because I
we love
know
your hair.
initially we had a video conference with both Gloria and Jackie, and we got to
We got to see it.
we got to see
Yeah.
the braid
She had it in.
action.
I'm also kind of sad that we didn't get to do it again because I enjoyed like seeing your facial expressions.
I know, yeah,
while
that was
talking,
fun.
So
Thank you. Well, I will tell you that the film crew had a joke, and it was, "Be afraid of the braid."
I love that.
Yes.
We're gonna make a t-shirt.
T-shirt
Be afraid of
about
the
it,
braid.
yeah.
You need T-shirts.
Yes.
Jackie, we're on it.
We got you, girl.
We got you.
But we appreciate you guys taking the time out to talk with us again. And Gloria, we talked about it after the show last time, how awesome it is that you just started kind of inserting yourself and like discovering and like kind of becoming an investigator yourself. Is that something that you... Sorry, I'm adding more questions.
I know.
Is that something you enjoy?
It's okay,
You like
go for it.
Do you enjoy doing that now? Is that kind of you've gotten more into it as time has gone on?
Have you researched other like have you like I know that you got into this because of your cousin, but have you like kept going like deeper and deeper in your investigation?
Yes, I have. And if I could be more active with missing persons or, cold cases, I would. I've looked at so many and I told Jackie just recently I sent something in. If you guys have never been to a site called NamUs, they have John Does and Jane Does and all kinds of things like that in there, and they go way back. And from looking at all the people, I looked at one and went, hey, this one could be this John Doe over here, this missing young man, from the 80s could be this John Doe that was found over here near where he was traveling to. So I turned that in. So yeah, I am becoming more and more vested in this. Wow. It is something I'm interested in, and if I had
tell them what they call you at the hotel here.
Oh dear Lord.
What is it?
They call when I started coming up to Lewiston up in there. There was a woman that remembered the cases. My cousin and all the other cases, and she called me the murder lady.
Yes.
Were you like yes?
I couldn't fault her for that,
No.
Because it really I read a lot of stuff on murders, so I'm either getting, books on serial killers or books on cookbooks. It's
we should be best friends.
I think that
but
this is destined.
On this topic, I know that we're supposed to be stopping, but one more question really quick for our listeners out there, that if they want to be more like Gloria, what is it that can they go to this website, or what can they do to like help local law enforcement without like stepping on toes?
The one thing that I can say is if you're going to help your family member or a friend of the family, if you have somebody, that has gone missing or has died from a violent crime or something like that, do not waste law enforcement's time. And you really have to keep your emotions in check and educate yourself. And maybe not as, don't ask for Christmas serial killer books like I do, but
we get them for each other anyway.
Yeah, we do that already.
Yeah.
You want to give them information that will be helpful, law enforcement. And you have to be able to sift through the information. I've gotten tips from people, and it's been absolutely useless. And did I pass this on to Jackie? No, I did not, because I didn't want to waste her time.
Right.
So, and then also what Jackie was saying, it's not, people expect the what is it, CIS or CSI? Yeah. It doesn't happen like that. People have been asking, well, why can't he just be brought in? And I used to think that way. I mean, it's like, well, here you got this. Just go get him. Take the shot.
Right.
You don't want to do that because you're going to only get one shot, and you really don't want that person, walking off and not getting justice. And it would be, again, a waste of time. Mm-hmm. So, the one piece of advice is don't waste law enforcement's time, and educate yourself and keep your emotions in check. Get the facts.
And
I think that's hard to do if you're a family member, but I appreciate that advice.
Well, we have a family member saying it, so people should listen to it more than if like someone else was saying it.
Yeah.
Right.
Y'all are some badass women. Yes. We really appreciate your time and your efforts, and we're gonna keep up with this. Again, this is Cold Valley. It premieres. November 29th.
On the ID channel.
Yeah.
On the ID channel.
Investigation Discovery for
Investigation
all
Discovery. ID Discovery.
of you. Oh,
I'm just
no.
kidding.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, thank you so much for taking the time out to talk with us. Could you
Absolutely.
would you be able to
Thank
send
you,
us a
guys.
selfie of you guys? Are you together? Is that a weird question to ask?
Can we do that?
What's that?
Can we
Can you
like?
send
Can
us-
you send us a selfie?
A picture.
Oh, we're not together right now.
Oh no.
Gloria had to go back to California, and I'm actually up in Spokane, Washington today.
Okay.
Oh wow. Well, thank you guys again for taking time out of your busy lives to.
Yeah, to have this little time zone party podcast with us.
Of course. Thank you.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Yes. Happy
Yes.
Thanksgiving. Enjoy the mashed
Happy
potatoes and green bean
Thanksgiving to you guys.
casserole.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, bye.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye.
All wrapped?
Yes.
Yes.
Cool. Okay, nothing else needed from me?
Nope.
Nope.
Awesome. No edits on my end, so everybody have a happy holiday.
Yay!
Thank
Happy
you.
holiday.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Justine.
Justine.
Bye, guys.
Bye,
Bye.
Justine.
Okay.
Bye, guys.
Bye, Gloria.
Bye, Jackie.
Have a good Thanksgiving.
You too.
Bye now.
You guys, they said bye to each other.
That was really cute. That was very cute.
All right.
I feel like they're best friends now.
Oh, absolutely.
Did we ask them that? Oh.
Well, we know they've been
We know.
they've been working on
Okay.
stuff together for years.
But I
Let's wrap it up.
Oh yeah.
yeah.
Let's do that. I was just gonna say that I really enjoyed that.
Yeah.
That was fun.
I know that we had to do it twice.
Honestly,
This one made a lot more
the,
sense.
the first time that we did it, just so our listeners know, the very first interview we had was via like a Skype type call. So we were looking at them and I felt so starstruck that I couldn't even speak words. I was like,
Yeah,
what
you
did I
said
say?
Wafclosh.
Wafclosh.
Wafclosh instead of wash.
And I was just like,
like we had just watched them on because they sent us this episode
like a sneak peek
of the sneak peek of the actual thing that's going to air, and we just watched it right before we interviewed them
to be
last
prepared
time.
again.
Yes, and then all of a
Just-
sudden I was like, oh my god, they're right there.
And
Hi.
just so all of you know, it's honestly really, really good.
Yeah, we're not just saying that.
And we're picky.
Like,
I mean,
no
we
one's-
watch a lot of these shows.
No one is paying us money right now.
no.
Definitely not.
Nope. Let's be real.
Yeah, I felt like this time we were just talking with our friends and we're like,
Yeah.
oh hey, and because last time it was like we were kind of starstruck, they were kind of
Y'all, my
like,
friend requested
like,
Gloria.
what do I
No, you
do?
didn't.
I
Did
did.
you?
I did. I totally did.
I'm about to do that.
She likes our page though. She likes Pop Crime and Wine.
I know
was
she
good.
did like our post the
Oh
other
yeah,
day.
so does there's a Lewis Clark
Yes.
killer page, and they also like us.
What?
So we should
We're
go
famous.
like that page.
Yeah.
But just so everyone knows, they're very down to earth people. It's a really awesome show, and you should watch it November 29th.
Ooh, do you remember we talked about this on the Skype interview and I was going to bring it up again tonight, but do you remember how they were found on Investigation Discovery to have the show?
They approached Jackie.
Jackie,
Yes, the show approached Jackie, and they went from there. So
Okay.
yeah.
I remember we asked her and I didn't want to bring it up again, but I also wanted our listeners to know that we did ask that question.
We do have a review section if you guys want to hear our newest reviews.
We do? We have a new one?
Yes, we do. It's called Love These Girls, and it's from Natalie Rankin.
Ooh, it's
Oh,
long.
look, I feel
Natalie.
like she has a really cool name. She must
What a
have a
cool-
pretty face.
We don't know
And,
her
like,
at
long
all.
blonde hair.
Who's that?
that I do.
She's
I mean,
beautiful. Okay, so she wrote, "If I were Oprah Winfrey, I would put this podcast on my favorite things list and make my whole audience listen to an episode. I'm not normally a true crime lover, but there's something about the storytelling aspect of this podcast that is so riveting to me and has gotten me hooked. The debates and discussion these ladies have are very intriguing and get me thinking. My favorite thing about Amanda, Mandy, and Taylor is that they go from talking about murder and abortion to talking about coffee creamer and marriage in 2.5 seconds.
That's true.
Almost all in the same breath. It's amazing. I am entertained, I am challenged, and I feel like I've just had a great conversation with 3 of my best friends."
I feel like
You
I
have.
can't even argue that.
No, that's
Like,
all
it's so
true.
accurate.
Nice.
Oh, thanks, Nat.
Natalie.
That we don't know?
That we don't know.
Yeah,
You're a total stranger.
Who is this Natalie?
Our friends can like us too.
Yeah, it's true. You're
Thanks,
allowed. Yeah, but this has been such a special kind of... I'm sorry that we didn't get our episode out on time on the Tuesday that we normally do, but this is more important, I think, getting the quality sound so you guys can actually hear what's, important, which is the story.
Yes.
Yeah. And just hearing it from them instead of just us is different too. Like we're not, I don't know. It's cool to like
we
hear
fangirled.
Well, because we do all these things. We like there have been episodes where we do something that is like back in the 1800s or like, and even though that these crimes happened 40 years ago, we're able to talk with people that are currently working on them. And I just feel like it gives us hope that it's going to be closed, because I know we've talked about this before. And in our Halloween episode, I did an Unsolved.
Oh, yeah. I don't like those.
And we were upset about it
none
a
of
little
us
bit.
none of us like it, and I've been yelled at for it. I've had people message me and be like, why'd you do an Unsolved?
I am going to need this to solve.
Yeah, please.
Like,
solve
they
it.
obviously know who did it, and I'm really... Jackie
We
and
don't know
Gloria... When we asked, they were like, no doubt in my
the
mind.
question.
That's definitely the
Gloria
person.
said
no.
yes.
Yeah,
we
Gloria
said
was like,
Jackie, I don't think is allowed to legally.
oh, right.
but she also said yes.
But I mean, she was like, I mean, it's obvious that
she just didn't want to say that she didn't want to say that all of
the
5 of
crimes
them were
were
connected,
definitely-
which I can understand where she's coming from, because it was like, they don't all have the same MO.
No.
So like
Right.
Kristen David's is totally different than the others.
What's weird to me is that there's like a 12-year-old and there's also a 21-year-old. Like, is this person...
And they have the same name.
Oh, yeah, Christina White and Christina Nelson. It's just
And then
strange.
Kristen.
And Kristen David.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think
Brandy
Brandy
and
and Steven were just
Yeah, Steven. Well, Steven was just
a byproduct kind of thing.
Brandy and Christina and the other Christina are similar.
Yeah.
But age-wise, it's very weird for me that it was a 12-year-old and then 18 and 21-year-old. Like...
Yeah, and we saw, after we watched the first episode, we saw that there was like the sneak peeks of the second episode, and they did talk
so
about
good.
like how there's a bunch of more,
there's different
like
murders.
well, not
Suicides
just
and
not
things
even
that
suicides,
they-
but like things that connected him. So
Right.
like other crimes.
Yes.
Like some of them were murders, some of them are suicides, and so I'm interested to see what those are. Because like we've said before, we do research a lot of things, so there's nothing that ties them together right now. So I'm kind of interested
There's
to
more
see
to the
if there's
story.
more.
Long story short, story long,
All the
go
things.
watch this show.
Yes.
Cold Valley
Because we're going to.
ID channel.
Yeah, we are definitely
I
having
think
a
we're
viewing
going to have a viewing party. Yeah.
November 29th is the first one, and
Yes.
December 6th, you said,
Yes.
is the second?
Yep.
Yes, so go watch the shit out of those, because they're
Watch
gonna
the
be great.
shit out of them.
Yep.
Leave no shit behind.
We've
so it's
had some fun.
next Thursday and then the following Thursday.
All right, let's do it.
Yep.
I'm in.
All right. Y'all.
Thanks for tuning in.
Thanks for tuning in.
Oh, yeah, and, this is Pop Crime and Wine.
Oh yeah, in case you didn't know.
By the way, you can find us on Instagram, Facebook at Pop Crime and Wine. And if you want to sponsor an episode, because we are looking for some sponsors, you can send us some monies on PayPal at popcrimewine@gmail.com.
Yep, and buy
Or
some merch.
Just, Oh my God, we have merch. And also send us some photos if you buy some and you get it in the mail and you're all excited, because we are going to do that.
Go to popcrimeandwine.threadless.com and you can get a mug or a t-shirt or
We also
All
put the
the
link
things.
in our bio on
Yeah.
Instagram.
link in bio, bitches. Link in bio, bitches.
Yes.
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 All right.
I've been loving my mug.
I used it this morning.
It was pretty great.
And up until like right before this podcast,
You didn't want to pour your
I went
wine in
straight
that?
from coffee to wine.
Isn't that how the clock goes normally? Like
Yeah.
before 2 o'clock is
Coffee.
and after 2 o'clock is wine.
It's too late for coffee. It's too early for beer.
So wine.
So my dad always says. But then he usually just drinks beer.
yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, okay. As always, guys.
We'll
See you next
Thursday. I'm just kidding. It's Thursday, isn't it?
No, today's Wednesday.
Oh, damn it. I thought I was going to be really clever.
Ignore Taylor.
But next Thursday we will be watching Cold Valley.
Yes,
so
Cold Valley.
We'll see you then.
We'll see you watching that.
Bye.
We'll be in your
Bye.
house watching you watch that.
Jesus.
Cheers.